Beep, 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 beep. Hey, how are you? I've been mulling. Got my coffee. Been sat having a mull. Oh, mull of Kintyre. Only more. Yeah, all that nonsense. Become a war teacher. November. Come on. Come and join us. We need more in order to make it work successfully. If you want me to keep going, this is the sort of thing I need you to come and do. Come and be a warrior teacher. But anyway, I was with them yesterday. It's always nice when I'm with the warrior teachers because I've got my teaching week, I call it. It's actually teaching 2 weeks, but the teaching week will do. So it was really lovely to see them. And from America, from the UK, so a mixed group, which is always lovely. And it's one of the modules in year 2 where we look at disability. So this is something that I don't think we talk about enough, certainly in terms of support and in terms of helping people. But we look at the history of it and what went on and all the stuff that's happening now. And there's such a thing as transabled now. I mean, you just think, how far will these people go? Now, I imagine it's a fairly rare occurrence. One would hope that it was a fairly rare occurrence. But it's interesting to consider how there isn't anything that they won't colonise, there isn't anything that they won't do to forward their vapid cause. Nothing. There's nothing they won't do, right, forward their vapid cause. And it's an extraordinary thing to imagine. So when I was doing the research on this, I can't remember if I said this before because it's not a topic that comes up very often, but I was looking at this concept of I identify as disabled, which is now, I think, causing huge problems for the DWP, which is the Department for Work and Pensions in the UK, who are finding themselves at the behest of people who are saying they're disabled when there's actually very little wrong with them. And this all comes down to the fact that we have a definition of disability which is enshrined into the law. However, what we're seeing is organisations and places like the public sector, but particularly the public sector, are saying you can identify as disabled. Do you consider you have a disability? Not are you registered disabled, right? So it's, which is, again, it's very much about breaking down boundaries. So we see similarities with other things, except it's not the same kind of boundary, which is what makes it interesting. So people say, oh, I'm disabled. Then they get a special chair or a special mouse or 20 minutes in a dark room once every 5 hours, whatever it may be, because they're identifying as disabled, because they are not being classed as disabled based on what the definition of disabled is. And we have a very distinct definition of disabled. And this is just another example of barrier breaking. It's just not a sexy one. And people don't seem very concerned about it very much. Which brings us to the subject of what came up yesterday, which it always does, of course, part of the module, neurodiversity. I'm a neurodiverse individual. It's a ridiculous notion. And yet we see it all the time, even amongst sensible people. Neurodiversity. But you need to understand that neurodiversity is from the same playbook as trans and gender and queer and, all the other rubbish that comes with critical social justice. Neuroscience, neurodiversity as an idea is based upon the assumption that there's no such thing as being mentally ill. It's based on the assumption that there's no such thing as being of right mind. Now, you could argue whether or not I'm of right mind. Most people would see the Edijester as being completely insane, and I concur. But there is a concept of being in your right mind. If you've got people running around in nappies or, dressed as pups in public and they're not of their right mind, right? They've succumbed to hedonism. What is that? Bit of hair. They've succumbed to hedonism to such an extent that they're becoming something that is a bother to the public. Now, neurodiversity would say, well, no, they're just neurodiverse. They've got a different way of seeing the world. And that's why you've got neurodiversity being pushed left, right and centre, because it is part of the same boundary breaking problem. People don't like it when they hear this, but it's straight out of Michel Foucault. It really is straight out of Michel Foucault. It's straight out of Madness and Civilization, the concept that there is no such thing as madness, that actually everybody should be able to do whatever they want whenever they want to do it. So what you end up with is a situation where those people who are terribly mentally ill are having their resources diluted by those people who are LARPing at being mentally ill by saying they're neurodiverse. I'm neurodiverse, just because they don't want to do X, Y, Z. What was it? One of the LGBTQ LARPing twits had was, I'm neurodiverse because I've got time blindness. They have a job turning up on time. This is the sort of crap you can expect. And until we get back to absolute definitions in law, What you will do is, for those people that do have a disability, right, and I count myself amongst those, I'm afraid, those that do have a disability, will find that their resources are watered down by the LARPing disability players. And there are many of them. And you can expect to see more of them as things move forward, especially if we manage to squeeze the life out of gender identity ideology, because they'll just skip to that one. I'm neurodiverse, right? I don't want to hear about it. Neurodiversity, I don't want to hear about it. Your mental state is of no interest to me in the public square, and that's where we need to get. So here's the definition of disability, right? You get it, the definition of disability. That's what it is. Go and have a look at it, right? It's a bloody fly. Go and find it, right? Go and find what the definition of disability is in the UK, or if you're in the US, go and have a look, see what yours is. That's the definition, and that's what the definition should be. And unless you are registered disabled, you shouldn't be able to use the term. Or if you use the term, it shouldn't be something that the employer then has to take account of, because they're going beyond the Equality Act. So you do you actually see yourself as having a disability? Well, I do actually. What's your disability? Well, I can't have anything but fillet steak for lunch in the canteen. It goes from something as obviously insane in that down to I need a better chair because I'm disabled because of my back. Are you? What's wrong with your back? Well, you can't ask. Right? Well, you can ask for a medical record, but that's asking for trouble then, because they'll say they discriminate against you. This is why the Equality Act's got to go. We need it replaced with something else. Right? So that's a real problem, right? And people don't understand why it's a real problem, but it is. It's going to be a massive problem. And I think it's probably worth you going and have a bit of a dig about and see what you can find out whether there's anything interesting in this field. Because the idea of transabled, I think, is going to start to get much more. And like one of my warrior teachers said yesterday, they used to think that the best idea was to class trans as a disability. That's the last thing we want. There's nothing disability about trans. Mostly fetish in it. Fetish, lunacy. No, they're not getting that epithet as well as everything else. No. Those that have a disability, that is a serious disability that impairs their life on a regular basis and on a long-term basis, cannot have their resources diluted by LARPing people calling themselves neurodiverse or whatever it is they're going to call themselves. It's designed to destigmatize, but actually what it does is it breaks down the distinct barrier between those that need help and those don't. So all you do is water down resources. And it's exactly the same thing as breaking down barriers in other areas such as gender and queering this. And it's all the same. And it all comes from the same playbook, which is the playbook where there are no barriers, there are no rules. There are no ideas of what's a fixed category, and it all stems from the same nonsense, queer theory and postmodernism. Don't believe me? Go and have a look. Funny old world, isn't it? Mull over. I'm going to go and write an article. I'll see you later. Tar-tar.